Second aim of the UN, and we're only going to learn two aims. The second one is that it helps try and solve international problems. Problems like what? Yell them out. Refugees, poverty, AIDS, and persecution of women, nuclear proliferation, environmental degradation, etc., etc. We've got problems that are international. They're not national, they're not within one state, they cross borders. So the UN try and helps the globe work together to solve international problems. These problems might be economic, social, or cultural, humanitarian. And if you want to do some more pre-reading again, you can go to the website and go specifically to the page on people movement. But the aim, to achieve international cooperation to solve international problems. What role does it take? Well, development and humanitarian support. So there are problems that cross borders. The UN tries to offer humanitarian support. So literally, it sends tents to places where people don't have a home after a typhoon goes through. It sends food goods, clean water, doctors, medical facilities. So it provides humanitarian support in the time of crisis. In order to do this, you can see some of these active verbs. These are doing verbs. Formulates policy, fosters cooperation, coordinates development. And so for us, our example for this particular aim is going to be about the refugee problem. So we have problems that cross borders, international crises. One of them is the refugee crisis. The UN does all these things. It writes policy, tries to get global actors to work together, and it when we do ethical issues, we have to do refugees and international laws around refugees. So we're hitting it twice. We're going to be very familiar with it by the end of the year. So its role, coordinating development, fostering cooperation, specifically with regards to refugees. More specifically, UN has actually created an agency, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So in order to complete its role, it has this agency which has a mandate, like a set of guidelines, to protect and support refugees at the request of government or as the UN sees fit. So one of the roles of the UN is to help protect this particular group of people, mainly because they're not getting protection from their state. Often it's the states who are persecuting them. Uganda just passed anti-gay laws, which came with an imprisonment for people seen to be involved in a gay act like holding hands or kissing. Imprisonment is the punishment, and repeated offenders can get the death penalty. So in that case, the UN offers some sort of protection to those people. They're being persecuted by their state. They can get protection from the UN and perhaps find a safe place somewhere else. Now, that would be an example of resettlement. Another state, neighbouring state, which doesn't persecute them. I think I have.
The Global Trends Report, released this year by UNHCR, shows that at the beginning of 2010, the number of people forcibly displaced worldwide stands at 43.3 million. This is the highest amount in more than a decade.
The dramatic thing is not only that these numbers are growing, but that the situations are becoming more protracted. We see conflicts that never end. We see people remaining as refugees or internally displaced for decades. And for these people, shelter is an absolutely essential need to be met.
As the leading organisation in the field of human displacement, UNHCR's aim is to ensure that even if these people have lost their homes, they haven't lost their future. At the beginning of 2010, more than 26 million people, 10.4 million refugees and 15.6 million IDPs were receiving protection or assistance, including shelter from UNHCR. In many situations generated by severe conflicts, upsurge violence, massive floods or intense earthquakes, UNHCR faced a range of emergencies requiring an immediate life-saving response. In all these operations, shelter is a key component of UNHCR assistance. Shelter is often prioritized as one of the fundamental tools for saving lives and prolonging survival.
I think everybody will see quite clearly that shelter is a priority in terms of protection, of protecting basic aspects of life.
Shelter is home, and for a refugee, for anybody who has to flee, you know, to have a home means more than just a physical setting.
In the last 6 decades, UNHCR has been providing assistance in emergencies, including shelter provision.
We can airlift, we can complement that by ship, sea, or by road, in order for us to reach up to 600,000 people in only 72 hours.
UNHCR is now the world leader in the provision of mass emergency shelter distribution and delivery. At global coordination level, the Emergency Shelter Cluster is co-chaired by UNHCR and IFRC. At country level, UNHCR leads the Emergency Shelter Cluster following conflict, while IFRC convenes the cluster after natural disasters.
We are trying, working with the IFRC and other partners as a cluster at the global level to make sure that globally, as a cluster, the response is more effective, more predictable, and more timely.
In the emergency shelter response, UNHCR's main partners are United Nations agencies, governments.
Okay. Point there is you get a clear idea of what the UN does. Its role in this situation is, through the UNHCR, to provide shelter. Can't be clearer than that. And he actually gave us a stat, they can provide 600,000 shelter for 600,000 in 72 hours. That's quite remarkable. Imagine the logistics involved in shipping and flying in that much equipment, that many personnel to set that up. So it has a clear role that it does through the UNHCR.
This is the outskirts of Malacca town in South Sudan's Upper Nile state. In the world's newest country, homes are being built for thousands of returnees. Many, like Galwak Tut, arrived with little more than a fierce sense of hope and determination. When the civil war broke out, Galwak and his family fled northward to Khartoum. Life wasn't easy, but it was stable until independence for the South became inevitable. Faced with discrimination and harassment, Galwak decided to move back to the South. Now he anxiously waits for his new home to be finished. In the last 14 months, more than 360,000 men, women, and children have come home from the north. UNHCR and the government of South Sudan are running a transitional shelter program. In 2011, some 7,000...
You can watch the rest of it in your own time. It's quite remarkable, that man. That's his home, literally. See how happy he was. That's actually a good spot to pause it on. UNHCR working with South Sudan, helping South Sudanese refugees return to South Sudan to build safe homes. And by homes, they don't mean brick shelters, they mean that. But it's a service that otherwise wouldn't exist if the UN didn't have a role to play. Okay, so we've done. Help the world solve international problems that cross borders. The role, through UNHCR, provides shelter and support for refugees and people who fear persecution. What power does the UN have? It has economic power. Billions of dollars for development. But it has a budget. It has a certain amount of money it can spend building homes, setting up tents, providing water, providing food. So it has economic power. Perhaps more importantly, it also has diplomatic power. It can facilitate relations between states. It can negotiate. It works with South Sudan to get their support to do its work. It works with Australia to try and soften Australia's stance and the treatment of refugees in our region. So it works actively with states to facilitate solutions to these problems. And that's diplomacy, or it facilitates diplomacy. You could also argue that it has political power. So the General Assembly can pass resolutions on anything. Now, they're non-binding, but they're important. They set the tone. If we return to global governance, the idea of norms, setting up certain norms around how states should behave. The General Assembly passes heaps of resolutions that try and set up norms. We would like states to do this. Please stop, persecuting this particular group. Please stop imprisoning asylum seekers. But you can't imagine how many resolutions they pass a year, which actually have very little effect. There's no binding effect, but they set a certain norm, an expectation around how states should behave. So several types of power there. Lastly, influence. You could say the UN is incredibly effective in what it does to solve this problem. It assisted 15.5 million internally displaced people. It dealt with 800,000 applications for asylum. And UNHCR helped 92,000 people be resettled in new homes in different parts of the world, safer parts of the world. So these are stats that go to the effectiveness of the UN. None of this would happen if UNHCR didn't exist. All these people would stay in unsafe places. Many of them would die. You could. Last year I used the example of the Millennium Development Goals for this whole section.
But we can use.
I think this one's a little bit better because we repeat all of these same stats again in third term. So we get to double up on it. That's why I kind of ditched MDGs. So incredibly effective. At the same time, it's limited. So, the resource budget for the UNHCR last year was 5.3. To give that figure some meaning, Australia spent just on our detention centres. So we spent more than half of what they spent simply locking people up. So you could say that the 5.3 tens of millions who need support. So that's a limitation on the effectiveness of the UN. It doesn't have the budget that states have. It's reliant on states to offer contributions, financial contributions. It often gets a lack of cooperation from member states. So we have this instrument, the Refugee Convention. Again, another example of global governance. Legal arrangements, rules about how we can solve this problem of refugees and people movement around the world, but states don't want to cooperate. We've only got 45 signatories. Indonesia won't sign it, Malaysia won't sign it, the US won't sign it, etc., etc., etc. So any action taken by the UN is limited because it requires states to cooperate. And lastly, lack of enforceability. So it's hard for the UN to say, Australia, we don't like what you're doing, we're going to take this action. The UN can't really do that. It's very limited in what action it can take. It can't say, Sudan, we don't like that you're persecuting Christians, stop it. Because short of sending in peacekeepers or peace enforcers, which it very rarely does, it can't enforce them. That's why it's all about cooperation, facilitating diplomacy, all those soft words around getting states to work together. And that's it. So we've got about 6 minutes. These are the short prompts which go to, I hope you can see, the only possible questions you can get for this global actor. Aim, role, power, and influence. All the questions on the SAC will be about one of those four things and matched up with one of the global actors, in this case, summarise that section of what I've just done according to those 4 prompts, which will be pretty close to actual stat questions. It just might be a different global actor. So can you complete those 4? Yes, do those 4. You won't get them done in the next 5 minutes, but you might as well start in the first 4 pretty quick. And the PowerPoint is on my portal.
The fear value would make you pick one of the